Some days change your life in ways you never see coming. This was one of those days. The sweet smell of fresh basil mixed with bubbling tomatoes filled every corner of my cozy kitchen. It was the kind of smell that made you feel safe and happy, like being wrapped in your favorite blanket on a cold day. Tuesday afternoons were my favorite time of the week. No rush, no worries, just me and my little rituals. I was humming along to an old song on the radio, one of those classic Motown tunes about love being like a heat wave. My hands moved carefully as I placed thick slices of creamy mozzarella cheese on top of a generous piece of sourdough bread. This was going to be my late lunch, the best kind of meal when you don't have to watch the clock, the only timekeeper I had was the slow dance of shadows creeping across my worn linoleum floor. Golden sunlight poured through the window above my sink like liquid honey, making the tiny dust particles sparkle as they floated through the air. It also lit up my favorite little ceramic robin that had been sitting on my windowsill for years. The cheerful bird was slightly chipped around the edges, but I loved it anyway. These were the moments I treasured most, perfectly ordinary, perfectly peaceful afternoons. The kind of moments that slip into your heart without you even noticing, becoming precious memories you'll hold on to forever. I had just finished sprinkling oregano on my sandwich and was reaching for the olive oil bottle when something made me pause. A shadow had fallen across the open screen door of my back porch, blocking some of the bright afternoon light. My hand stopped in midair. I wasn't expecting anyone today. My best friend Sarah was far away in Arizona, spending time with her grandchildren. My son Michael was busy with his own life, the way grown children should be. For just a moment, a tiny flutter of worry went through my chest. You know how it is these days, unexpected visitors can make you nervous. But then I heard a voice. It was hesitant, uncertain, and deeper than I remembered from years past. Linda, Mrs. Henderson? I turned around, raising my hand to shield my eyes from the bright light streaming through the doorway. Standing there, outlined like a shadow against the afternoon sun, was a young man. He was tall and thin, with a familiar way of holding his shoulders that tugged at something in my memory. As he stepped further onto my porch, letting the screen door close behind him with a soft sigh, I could see his face more clearly. The sunlight revealed features I recognized, even though they had changed so much. My goodness, I whispered to myself. Liam. It was Liam Peterson from next door. Good heavens, how long had it been since I'd really seen him? The last clear memory I had was of a freckle-faced little boy with scraped knees, always chasing after baseballs that had landed in my flower garden. He was constantly trying to fish his toys out of my petunias while apologizing in that sweet, earnest way children do. Now here he stood, fully grown. He had to be in his early 20s, I thought, with amazement. His sandy blonde hair was longer than the neat, short cuts his mother Susan used to insist on. It fell across his forehead in soft waves that caught the light. He still had those same thoughtful blue eyes I remembered from his childhood, but now they seemed clouded with something I couldn't quite identify. There was a weight in them that hadn't been there when he was small. He wore a simple t-shirt and faded jeans, both looking a bit wrinkled and worn, as if he'd been traveling for a long time or hadn't been sleeping well. Everything about him seemed tired, uncertain. Liam? My goodness, come in, I said, surprise and warmth filling my voice. I quickly wiped my hands on my apron, the floral one Michael had given me for Mother's Day several years ago. What a wonderful surprise. I almost didn't recognize you. He offered me a small smile, but it was shy and didn't quite reach his eyes. There was something sad about it that made my heart squeeze a little. Yeah, it's been a while, he said quietly, shuffling his feet on my doormat like he used to do as a child when he was nervous about something. Mom and Dad aren't home, he continued, then trailed off, looking lost and unsure. I tried calling their cell phones, but, oh, that's right, I said, remembering. Susan mentioned they were going up to the lake for a few days. A little anniversary trip, I think. Bill and Susan Peterson had been my neighbors for nearly 30 years. They were good people, quiet, kept mostly to themselves, but always ready with a friendly wave when we passed in our yards. They were the kind of neighbors who would lend you a cup of sugar or help carry your groceries if you needed it. Oh, right, Liam said, and I watched his shoulders slump a little more. He looked around my kitchen, his gaze moving slowly from the bubbling tomato sauce on the stove to my half-made sandwich on the counter. Smells really good in here, he said softly. Just putting together some lunch, I replied, gesturing toward my sourdough bread and cheese. Running a bit late today. Have you eaten anything? It was an automatic question, the kind mothers and grandmothers ask without thinking. The kind of question that comes from years of taking care of people. He hesitated, his eyes moving from the food back to my face. Not really. I drove straight through from school. He ran his fingers through his hair, a gesture that seemed more exhausted than casual. I probably should have called first, or waited until they got back. Sorry to just show up like this. Nonsense, Liam, I said, trying to sound light and cheerful, though a small knot of worry was beginning to form in my chest. Something about the way he carried himself, the way he spoke, told me this wasn't just a casual visit. That's what neighbors are for. Come on in. Sit down. There's plenty of food to share. I pulled out one of the wooden chairs from my small kitchen table, the one with the slightly wobbly leg that I kept meaning to fix, but never got around to. Unless you're in a hurry to be somewhere else, I added. He shook his head slowly. No hurry at all. He walked over to the table and sank into the chair like he was carrying a heavy load. His movements were weary, older than his years. He placed his hands flat on the tabletop, and I noticed his knuckles were white where he gripped them together. There was a faint smudge of what looked like grease or oil on his forearm. I turned back to my sandwich making, but now I was preparing two instead of one. So school's out for the summer then? I asked, keeping my voice casual and light. I remembered Susan telling me proudly that Liam was studying engineering at some good school up north. A very good school, she had said, beaming with maternal pride. Something like that, he mumbled, his gaze fixed on the worn checkered pattern of my tablecloth. His voice was so low it was almost a whisper. The silence that followed felt heavy, filled only by the gentle bubbling of my tomato sauce and the distant sound of someone mowing their lawn down the street. The cheerful Motown song had ended, and now a slower, more melancholy tune was playing softly on the radio. I found myself watching him more than focusing on the sandwiches. His young face looked pale, almost gray, and there were dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't been sleeping well. This definitely wasn't just a casual drop-in, because his parents weren't home. Something was definitely wrong. The air in my sunny, warm kitchen suddenly felt different, heavier, charged with worry and unspoken troubles. I carefully placed the finished sandwiches onto my best plates, the ones with the tiny blue flowers around the edges. The sound of ceramic against ceramic seemed loud in the quiet room. I found myself wondering what it was he wasn't telling me. What had brought him to my door looking like a ship that had lost its way in a storm? My ordinary Tuesday was rapidly becoming something entirely different. I ladled generous portions of tomato soup into bowls, the rich red color bright and inviting. I set a plate and bowl in front of him with gentle care. Here you go, I said softly. It's not fancy, but it's hot and filling. He looked up at me then, and for just a fleeting moment, I saw that little freckle-faced boy again, the one who used to look at a fresh-baked cookie with such serious, grateful eyes. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson, he said quietly. Please, call me Linda, I said, settling into the chair across from him with my own plate and bowl. We've known each other too long for such formality. I took a small bite of my sandwich, then leaned forward slightly. Now, tell me what's really on your mind, Liam. You look like you're carrying the weight of the whole world on those shoulders of yours. I tried to keep my voice gentle and inviting, not pushy or prying. The initial surprise of his unexpected arrival was now completely replaced by genuine concern, the kind of worry a mother feels, or maybe just the care of a neighbor who's known a child his entire life. He picked up his spoon and began stirring his soup slowly, round and round, as if the answers he was searching for might be hiding somewhere in its crimson depths. The spoon clinked softly against the bowl in a steady rhythm. The silence stretched between us, and I knew with absolute certainty that this was going to be much more than just a shared lunch. This ordinary afternoon was about to unfold in ways I never could have imagined or predicted. He took a tentative bite of his sandwich, then another. At first he ate slowly, carefully, but then with growing urgency, as if he was suddenly realizing just how hungry he really was. I simply watched him, letting him eat in peace. Sometimes, food is the first step in healing, the easiest way to build a bridge between two people or to soothe a troubled spirit. The combination of basil and tomato, the melted cheese, the warm bread, these were simple comforts that spoke without words. The sunlight had shifted slightly during our quiet meal, now casting longer, more dramatic shadows from the mason jars. lined up on my windowsill. The kitchen felt insulated from the outside world, like a small, safe harbor where ships could dock during a storm. After several minutes, he put his spoon down and looked directly at me. Those blue eyes still held that troubled depth I'd noticed when he first arrived. "It's about school," he began, his voice barely louder than a whisper. He picked nervously at a loose thread on the edge of his placemat. I don't think I'm going back there." There it was, the first crack in the dam, the first glimpse of what was really troubling him. I leaned back in my chair, my own lunch temporarily forgotten. I didn't gasp or exclaim in surprise. I just nodded slowly, trying to show him that I was listening, that I was willing to hear whatever he needed to say without judgment. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Do you want to talk about it?" He looked up at me with what seemed like surprise, maybe even relief, flickering in his eyes. It was as if he had been expecting a completely different reaction. Perhaps a lecture, or the kind of well-meaning but ultimately dismissive advice that adults sometimes offer without really listening first. I remembered being his age, how enormous every decision felt, how terrifying it could be to disappoint the people you loved most in the world. "I don't know if I can explain it properly," he said, his gaze dropping back to focus on the table. It's not for me. All those complicated equations, the lab work, the technical stuff. It feels like I'm trying to squeeze myself into a box that's way too small. Or maybe it's just the completely wrong shape for who I am." He let out a long, heavy sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside his chest. "Everyone's so proud, you know? Mom and Dad, all their friends and neighbors. Liam's going to be an engineer, they say, like it's this amazing title I've been given. And I'm supposed to just wear it, whether it actually fits me or not." I thought about my own son, Michael. He had gone through something similar in college, a phase where he wanted to drop out of his business program to become a musician. I remembered the panic I had felt, the late-night conversations, the worry that he was throwing away his entire future. But I had also tried, really tried, to listen to what he was actually saying. In the end, he had found a way to compromise, to integrate his passion for music into a more traditional career path. But Liam seemed different. This wasn't a passing whim or a moment of doubt. This felt deeper, more fundamental, like something that came from the very core of who he was. "It takes a lot of courage to admit something like that, Liam," I said softly. "Especially when you feel like you might be letting important people down." He looked up at me sharply, his eyes wide with something like amazement. "You really think so?" "I know so," I said firmly, meeting his gaze directly. "It's much easier to just go along with things, to follow the path that everyone expects you to follow. To question that path, to even consider stepping off it and finding your own way, that takes real bravery." A faint flush of color crept up his neck. He picked up his sandwich again but didn't take a bite, just held it in his hands like he was thinking. "I haven't told them yet," he said quietly. "Mom and Dad. I drove here instead of going home. I guess I just needed to not be there at school, and I couldn't face telling them something this big over the phone." He swallowed hard, his throat working. "I feel like such a complete failure." "Oh, Liam," I said, my heart truly aching for this young man sitting across from me. "Changing your mind, realizing that something isn't right for you, that's not failure. That's discovery. That's learning who you really are as a person." I paused for a moment, then decided to share a piece of my own story, something I hadn't talked about in years. "You know, I wanted to be an artist when I was young. I was all set to go to art school, had my portfolio ready and everything. My parents, bless their hearts, were absolutely terrified. They wanted something more stable and secure for me, so I ended up studying to be a teacher instead." He looked at me with new interest, his eyebrows raised. "You were a teacher?" "For a little while," I said with a gentle smile. "And I did like it. Parts of it anyway. But that little artist inside me, she never really went away. I still paint, you know, in my spare time. It's not a career, but it's still a part of who I am." I leaned forward slightly. "Sometimes our paths through life aren't straight lines, Liam. Sometimes they curve and loop and twist in unexpected directions. Sometimes we even have to backtrack a little to find the right way forward." He was listening intently now, his earlier tension seeming to ease just a little. He took a deep breath. "But what if," he started, then stopped. "What if I don't know what the right direction is? What if I just feel completely lost? The vulnerability in his voice was almost painful to hear. It hung in the warm air of my kitchen like something fragile and precious. This was the heart of it. The real reason he had appeared on my doorstep looking like a bird that had been caught in a terrible storm. He wasn't just running away from a course of study he didn't like. He was adrift in the vast, overwhelming ocean of his own future, with no land in sight and no compass to guide him. In that moment, my ordinary kitchen with its bubbling sauce and cheerful ceramic robin and checkered tablecloth felt like it had transformed into something more important. A lighthouse, maybe. A small beacon of hope in his confusion and fear. I knew this conversation was far from over. I knew I had to choose my next words very, very carefully. This young man wasn't just my neighbor's son anymore. He was a human, being in pain, reaching out for help, and I wanted to do everything I could to guide him toward calmer waters. Anymore, he was a soul searching for a bit of guidance, and somehow he'd come to me. The weight of that, the unexpected honesty settled upon me, not as a burden, but as a quiet privilege. The aroma of basil and tomato now mingled with something far more complex, the scent of unfolding trust. I let his question hang in the air for a moment, giving it the space it deserved. Feeling lost is a perfectly normal part of finding your way, Liam. I said, my voice gentle. I think everyone feels that way. At some point, probably more often than admit. The trick isn't to have all the answers right away, but to be brave enough to keep asking the questions. He nodded slowly, absorbing my words. Heffinally took another bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. The simple act of him eating, of accepting the nourishment I'd offered, felt like a small victory, a sign that he was at least partially grounded in the present moment. My dad, he's an engineer, Liam said, his voice quiet. He loves it. He sees the world in terms of how things work, how they fit together. He's always been so sure of everything. I always thought I should be like that too. We all want to make our parents proud, he acknowledged, and it's natural to look up to them, to want to follow in their footsteps. Especially if you admire them, but you're not your dad, Liam. You're you. You have your own way of seeing the world, your own things that will make your heart sing. I smiled a little. And some items. Those things are very different from what our parents envision for us. Not because they're wrong, but because we're different people. I thought about Bill, his precise garden, his meticulously organized garage. He was a good man, steady, and reliable. It was easy to see how a son might feel the pressure to emulate that kind of certainty. What if I don't know what makes my heart sing? He asked the question, almost a whisper, laced with a genuine noodle drink that tugged at me. What if I'm just not good at anything special? Oh, he highly doubt that, Liam, I said with more conviction than I perhaps even realized. I felt sometimes our talents are quieter, less obvious. Not everyone is meant to build bridges or design skyscrapers. Some people are meant to connect with others or create beauty in small ways, or understand the complexities of the human heart. I paused, searching for the right words. What did you enjoy doing when you were little, before you had to start thinking about careers? And what was sensible? He looked a little surprised by the question. He frowned in concentration, his gaze drifting towards the window, towards the old oak tree in my backyard. I used to like drawing, he said, a hesitant note in his voice as if admitting a secret. And I loved taking things apart to see how they worked, not always putting them back together so well, he added with a faint self-deprecating smile. Drove my mom crazy drawing, I echoed, a little spark of interest lighting up inside me. What kind of things did you draw? Anything real, people, mostly. Animals I used to try and capture. I don't know how they looked when they were moving, or how they felt. It sounds silly. He ducked his head a little. It doesn't sound silly at all, Liam, I said, warmly. It sounds like you have an artist's eye, an observer's heart. And that curiosity about how things work, that's a wonderful trait. It doesn't just apply to machines. It can apply to Pueblito stories, to life itself. He was quiet for a long moment, tracing the rim of his soup bowl with his finger. The only sounds were the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway and the distant chirp of a blue jay. The initial tension in the room had largely dissipated, replaced by a thoughtful quiet. It felt like we were in a little bubble, temporarily shielded from demands and expectations of the outside world. I took an elective last semester, he said finally, his voice a little stronger. Photography. Just for fun. Ray a little fill a credit. He looked up at me, a new light flickering in his eyes. I loved it, Linda. I mean, I really loved it. Being in the dark room, watching the images appear. It felt like magic. His words came a little faster now, a hint of enthusiasm creeping in. And I think I might be kind of good at it. A genuine smile spread across my face. Well now, that sounds like something, doesn't it? I said gently. That sounds like a spark. He nodded, a hopeful expression deepening in his face, though it was still tinged with uncertainty. But it's photograph, it's not engineering. It's not stable. It's not what anyone expects. Ooh, expectations. I sighed, leaning back. They can be such heavy blankets, can't they? Sometimes they keep us warm, but sometimes they just smother us. I met his gaze directly. Liam, whose life are you living, yours or the one you think other people have mapped out for you? He didn't answer immediately. He picked up his glass of water, took a long drink, his eyes thoughtful. The weight of my question seemed to settle between us, profound and undeniable. Outside, a cloud must have passed over the sun because the light in the kitchen dimmed for a moment, casting his face in shadow. It made him look older, more serious. The boy was gone, and a young man grappling with one of life's biggest questions set before me. The journey into this unexpected deep conversation felt like we were navigating a winding river, each bend revealing a new perspective, a new emotional landscape. And I had a feeling we're approaching a significant turn. Liam set the water glass down with a quiet thud. I guess I've always tried to do what was expected, he admitted, his voice low. And Ernest, be the good son, the smart kid, get the good grades, go to the right school. I thought that was the way to be happy, or at least to make everyone else happy. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Turns out it just made him feel like an imposter. That's a very honest thing to say, I replied, acknowledging the rawness of his admission. And it's a very common feeling. I think we all wear masks from time to time. The trick is not to forget who's underneath. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Your parents, Liam, they love you, I know they do. Bill and Susan are good people. They want you to be happy and successful, but maybe, just maybe, their definition of success or the path they imagine for you isn't the only one, and maybe deep down all they truly want is for you to be genuinely happy, to be fulfilled, even if it's not in the way they initially pictured. He listened intently, his blue eyes fixed on mine. The earlier cloud of worry hadn't entirely lifted, but there was a new openness in his expression, a willingness to consider possibilities he might have dismissed before. It's just telling them, he said, the anxiety returning to his voice. The thought of that conversation, it terrifies me, disappointing them. I understand that fear, I said softly. Truly I do. But what if you're underestimating them? What if they're more understanding than you think? Parents have a way of surprising us. You know, their love for their children often runs deeper and is more flexible than we give them credit for. I thought of my own moments of doubt with Michael, the times I'd had to adjust my own expectations, and how ultimately our relationship had deepened because of it. And what's the alternative, Liam? To continue down a path that makes you feel like an imposter. How long can anyone sustain that before something breaks? He winced as if my words had struck a little too close to home. Not much longer, guess, he conceded. That's why I'm here at your kitchen table instead of an thermodynamics lecture. He managed a weak smile. Well, I'm glad you are, I said, returning the smile. My grilled cheese sandwiches might not solve all your problems, but my kitchen is always open for a chat. I looked at his now empty plate. More soup? Another sandwich? He shook his head. No, thank you, Linda. I'm full. It was really good. Thank you. There was a sincerity in his voice that warmed me. It wasn't just about the food, it was about the space, the listening ear, the shared moment of quiet understanding. So photography, I said, steering the conversation back gently. What kind of pictures do you like to take? You said you liked drawing people, their expressions, how they felt. His face lit up again, that spark I'd noticed earlier growing a little brighter. Yeah, exact portraits, mostly candid shots, trying to capture a moment, a real emotion, not just posed smiles. He hesitated, then reached for his backpack, which he'd left near the door. He rummaged inside for a moment and pulled out a worn leather binder. It looked more like a sketchbook than a traditional diary. I started carrying this around, he said a little shyly. It's not much, but he opened it and carefully turned it around for me to see. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a sketch, it was a photograph tucked into the pages, a stunning black and white portrait of an old man sitting on a park bench, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, his eyes looking off into the distance with a profound sadness, yet also a quiet dignity. The play of light and shadow was exquisite. It wasn't just a picture, it was a story. Liam, I whispered, genuinely moved. This is beautiful, truly. A slow blush spread across his cheeks. You think so? I know so, I said, my gaze still fixed on the photograph. You have a gift, Liam. A real gift. This isn't just something. You're kind of good. At this instant, I looked up at him, seeing him now not just as the worried young man but as an artist, someone with a unique way of seeing and capturing the world. This is that spark, and it's not just a spark, Liam, it's a flame. He looked down at the photograph, then back at me, and for the first time since he'd walked into my kitchen, I saw a genuine, unclouded smile light up his face. It transformed him, chasing away the shadows. It was the smile of someone who has been seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in a long while, and in that moment the emotional depth of our unexpected encounter crystallized. It wasn't just about a career choice anymore, it was about identity, about courage, about the quiet, profound human need to be understood and validated. The simple act of making lunch had somehow unlocked a space for honesty and revelation, and my little kitchen had become a sanctuary. Realization of what was happening, the sheer unexpected intimacy of it settled over me with a sense of awe. Liam carefully closed the journal, the smile still lingering on his lips. Thank you, Linda, he said, his voice filled with a quiet emotion that resonated deeply within me. No one's ever reacted like that to my pictures, or to me wanting to do something like this. Well, maybe they just haven't seen them properly, I replied gently, or maybe they haven't seen how much it means to you. I leaned forward a little, my hands clasped on the table. Liam, that photograph, it hashed, it tells a story that's a rare thing. Engineering is a fine profession, Annabelle one, building things that last, but capturing a human soul, a fleeting moment of truth, like you did there, that's a different kind of building, a different kind of lasting. He seemed to be mulling over my words, his gaze distant for a moment, as if he were looking at his own future through a new lens. The kitchen was quiet again, but it was a comfortable sense now, filled with understanding rather than unspoken anxieties. The afternoon sun, which had been playing hide and seek with the clouds, now streamed in with renewed warmth, bathing the room in a soft golden glow. It felt almost symbolic, like a clearing after a storm. I have a few more in here, he said, tapping the journal, if you'd like to see them. There was a vulnerability in his offer, a tentative hope that made my heart swell a little. I would love to, Liam, I said, my voice sincere. He opened the journal again, and for the next half hour or so he showed me his photographs. They were mostly portraits, as he'd said. An elderly woman laughing, her eyes crinkling at the corners, a child looking up at a street performer with pure unadulterated wonder, a musician lost in his music, his fingers a blur on the strings of a guitar. Each one was more than just a picture, it was a glimpse into a life, a captured emotion. He didn't have many, perhaps a dozen or so that had he made worthy of sharing, but each one was powerful. He spoke a little about each person, where he'd taken the photo, what had drawn him to them. His voice, which had been so hesitant and worried when he first arrived, was now animate and diffused with a quiet passion. I listened, truly listened, offering a comment here and there, but mostly just letting him share his world with me. I saw the way his eyes lit up when he talked about catching the right light, or the challenge of getting someone to relax enough to show their true self to the camera. It was clear this wasn't just a hobby. It was a calling, something that resonated deep within his being. "This is remarkable, Liam," I said when he finally closed the journal. "You have a genuine talent, a way of connecting with people and seeing them, truly seeing them." Looked down, a pleased but still slightly shy expression on his face. "It's what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing," he said softly. "When I'm behind the camera, everything else just fades away, all the worries, the expectations, it's just me in that moment. Then that's what you need to hold into." I told him, "That feeling, that's your compass, Liam, that's what will guide you even when the path isn't clear or easy." He nodded, taking a deep breath. "So what do I do now?" he asked, the practicalities of his situation resurfacing, about mom and dad, about everything. "Well," I began, choosing my words carefully. "First you breathe. You've made a huge realization today, and that takes time to settle. As for your parents, I think you need to talk to them honestly, openly. Show them your photographs. Show them your passion, just like you showed me." I paused. It might not be an easy conversation. They might be disappointed or worried at first. That's natural, but they're your parents. They love you. Give them a chance to understand, to see this new path you're discovering. What if they don't? He asked, the fear still a shadow in his eyes. Then you Keep showing them, I said firmly but kindly. You live your truth, Liam, respectfully, lovingly, but you live it. Sometimes it takes time for people we love to adjust their dreams for us to see us for who we truly are becoming, not just who they thought we would be. You might need to find a way to support yourself while you pursue this, to show them you're serious, that this isn't just a whim. Maybe you could even find a way to combine your engineering mind with your artistic eye. There are technical aspects to photography. I'm sure he considered this. I suppose so. The equipment, the lighting, the composition, there's a science to it as well as an art. A small smile played on his lips. Maybe I'm not throwing everything away after all. Exactly, I said, relieved to see that glimmer of optimism. You're redirecting your energies, your talents. It's a pivot, not a full stop. He sat there for a moment, looking more at peace than he had all afternoon. The tension had drained from his shoulders, and his eyes, while still thoughtful, no longer held that haunted look. He seemed lighter. Finally, he stood up. I didn't know, think maybe try calling Mom and Dad again, see when they'll be back. That sounds like a good plan, I said, rising with him. I walked him to the screen door. The afternoon was beginning to wane, the shadows lengthening across Mismal Yard. The scent of my roses, just beginning to bloom by the porch steps, drifted in. He paused at the door, turning back to me. Linda, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I don't know how to thank you. You have no idea how much this afternoon has meant to me. Oh, Liam, I said, my own eyes feeling a little misty. You did all the hard work. All I did was make some lunch. And listen, you did a lot more than that. He insisted. You listened without judging you. You saw me, and you gave me hope, I guess. He shuffled his feet. It's more than anyone else has done. I reached out and gently squeezed his arm. You're a good young man, Liam Peterson. You have a good heart and a real gift. Don't ever let anyone, not even yourself, tell you otherwise. He nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing. I won't, he promised, his voice a little shaky. He took a deep breath. Okay, I'm going to go, but thank you, really, anytime, Liam, I said warmly. My door is always open, and my kitchen too. He gave him one last grateful smile, then turned and walked down the porch steps across the lawn that separated our houses. I watched him go, his stride a little more purposeful now, his head held a little higher. He wasn't magically cured of all his uncertainties. I knew that the road ahead for him would still have its challenges, but something had shifted both in him and in me. As I turned back into my quiet kitchen, the remnants of our shared lunch still on the table, I felt a profound sense of something. Wasn't just warmth or satisfaction. It was a sense of connection, a feeling of having participated in something genuinely meaningful. An ordinary Tuesday lunch had turned into an extraordinary human moment. I, a woman in her late 50s whose days usually followed a quiet, predictable rhythm, had been privileged to witness a young man begin to find his voice, his courage, and in helping him, perhaps I'd rediscovered a little piece of my own youthful idealism, my own belief in the power of dreams. I cleared the plates, the scent of basil and tomato now tinged with the lingering memory of shared confidences and net hopes. The sun dipped lower, painting the kitchen in hues of orange and pink. I thought about Liam, about his photographs, about the difficult conversations that lay ahead for him. And I thought about how life in its most unexpected moments can bring us the most profound gifts. This wasn't just a story about my neighbor's son walking in while I was making lunch. It was a story about connection, about seeing another person's potential, and about the quiet, powerful impact one human being can have on another just by offering a listening ear and an open heart. I went to bed that night, feeling a sense of ease and a quiet anticipation for whatever ordinary or extraordinary thing the next day might bring. And I knew with a gentle certainty that Liam Peterson was going to be okay. He was going to find his way, and maybe, in some small way, it helped illuminate a little bit of his path. English auto-generated.